Hi, everybody. Jeremy Parson here. I help out with Scarpa with their American media presence. And we're today with one of my favorite people, not just in the Italian wine world, but also the California, the international wine world, Deborah Parker Wong, one of my best friends in wine, someone who I've worked with on the slow wine guides. And now she has taken over. She's the new coordinating editor of our baby, as we like to call it.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk about a Scarpa wine in a minute, but I want to get right to Deborah. And Deborah, can you tell us what's happening? How is the guide expanding? What's new about the guide? Tell us what's happening. We're really, congratulations on taking over. It couldn't be in better hands, and it makes me sleep better at night knowing it's in your able hands. So tell us what's going on with the guide this year.
You are far too kind, Jeremy. You're making me tear up. You're far too kind. Slow wine, the momentum here in California, also in Oregon, Washington, and now the New York State is phenomenal. There's a phenomenal interest and momentum around producers who want to be part of the guide, and for very good reason, because it's representative of folks that work well within the ethos of slow food and slow wine. It's very exciting. This year, we're working on the 2021 guide now. So 2020 is out there. We encourage you to take a look at it. The digital version is readily available for download, and Jeremy can share that link with everyone. We're working on the 2021 guide, which means this year virtual visits. We're spending a lot of time Zooming with producers, getting updates on the wines that we're going to be listing. Their wines will be listing in their 2021 guide. And that means producers all over California, Oregon, Washington, and New York.
And so this year you guys added the first year we just did California, then we did 2 years of California and Oregon. You became involved in the second year. And it was just excuse the pun, the organic passing the torch. Perfect. Yeah. But so this year you're adding Washington and New York, so really expanding. And can you tell us a little bit about, in the time of the pandemic, you're doing it all. In the past, we had a taster visit every winery, but this year you shifting to deal with the pandemic. How's that going?
Well, it's going great. Folks are really taking advantage of technology. It's the same platform that we're using right now for our virtual visits. We, for a producer that's already listed in the guide, we simply take them through the 2020 guide entry and look at that entry. And then we gather the information to update for the new wines that will be listed and any new changes and evolution. And there's a lot of things happening at these wineries, and people are really taking on new sustainability measures all the time. We want to be up to date on that. And we also want to talk about the current vintages, the wines that will be in the market when the guide is released in January of 2021. So
in a way, nobody wants this pandemic. The pandemic's but it's also an opportunity. I mean, a lot of winemakers are just at home and have no way to get their voice out there. And it's so great that slow wine is a platform for that voice. Even, they can't go to trade tastings. They can't go to consumer tastings. They haven't even opened up winery tasting rooms yet in California, if I'm not mistaken. So
no, they have. We are open. We are open here in Sonoma and Napa. We are now open, and it's social distancing. There's a lot of CDC regulations around how they can operate. So it's a very slow, kind of gradual move back toward the new normal. So
well, I'm really
I would say that producers are. I was just talking to Marissa Clendenin Matella about. She said, we couldn't do all of our tastings. She has her own project. In addition to Au Bon Climat, she has her own project. It's very, very small, not large enough yet to be listed in the guide. And she said we could do our Garagiste tastings. These are very, very important for small emerging brands. And so she's really been taking advantage of, the virtual environment for talking and tasting her wines.
Well, that's great. I couldn't be more happy that what we created together is serving the community there in a time when they need to get their voice out there. So
Absolutely.
if you know, a lot of people who are watching this have probably either attended a tasting that Deborah's led or have tasted with her. One of the most exciting things about working on slow wine with her was that she's one of the best technical tasters I've ever sat to at a tasting. She's just it's just such a compelling experience when you're sitting tasting wine and talking about wine with her. And so we were very fortunate that Scarpa shared a bottle of the 2013 Frei. We've got our mirror bottles. And by the way, that backdrop that Deborah has is the Bologna vineyard, where the famous Barbera d'Asti, the Bologna Barbera d'Asti, is grown for Scarpa. If I'm not mistaken, the Frei is grown on the other side of the hill to Deborah's right. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure looking at the photo.
Right. So different exposition. So a very different exposition in Monferrato.
And I know someday, Deborah, you and I will visit this estate together. But
I can hardly wait to set foot on the ground there. Virtual's fun, but sure would be nice to actually see it firsthand. You know. Absolutely.
Back to Italy, and wow, this wine. I'm just going to let you do your thing. This is a 2013 Frei. Frei is a native variety of Piedmont, of Longa and Monferrato that a lot of people have abandoned in the last couple of decades because they're planting more lucrative Nebbiolo, more lucrative Barbera. But Scarpa is one of those wineries, as you guys already know, that is a big champion of the other varieties that aren't getting as much attention. And this is, to me, one of the best examples. So I'll let Deborah take it and walk us through this wine.
Absolutely. And right away, I'm going to point to the aromatics. They're just leaping out of the glass. So let's set the stage a little bit. Do we know enough about the 2013 vintage to have a context if it was a cooler or warmer vintage, or if it was just a normal vintage?
2013 is considered probably the best vintage of the last decade. It was a classic vintage where you had that even, it's what, some people compared it to 2004, some people compared it to 9. There's some analogy with 90, but it's one of those vintages that the growers in Piedmont call classic. Very even vegetative cycle, nothing extreme, and of course, they avoided the extreme weather events that they saw the next year in 2014. So,
right, we all know about 14. So,
in my view, it's a great vintage. I think pretty much most people would agree that 2013 in Longa and Monferrato. Of course, remember we're in Monferrato, not Longa.
Yeah, Monferrato. Yeah,
was a classic vintage, great aging vintage. And this wine is delicious. You're right, the aromatics of just pop out. Variety that used to be grown, side by side with Nebbiolo. Again, a lot of people ripped out their Frei because they wanted to grow more Nebbiolo and to some extent more Barbera. But it's it's related. It's a genetic Nebbiolo. And like Nebbiolo, very tannic, but doesn't have the earthy. I find it doesn't have the earth that you get in Nebbiolo. It's more of a fruit. But I want to hear your
absolutely. Okay, one more question about this wine before we get into the sensory analysis on it. Is that does this wine spend time in large format botti? Is it a Slovenian botti aging regime for this wine? So what we're seeing in terms of secondary, tertiary is not really coming from the influence of wood, right? The influence of oak.
No. All of Scarpa's wines, essentially all of their wines are vinified as you would vinify a Barolo, a traditional style Barolo. Fermentation in stainless steel today, and then aging in large, like you said, botti, large casks, Slavonian oak, and I'm pretty sure all the casks there are Slavonian. I mean, this is old school all the way. The thing I love about them, very clean, fresh style of winemaking.
When you say old school, we have to make sure to note that it's clean, super clean. Yeah. Absolutely.
But so that, you know, that depth that you get in, they don't even have a barrique around just for overflow or anything like that. It is all large and all the red wine. They're actually starting to make some more white wines at Scarpa. They're making a Timorasso that'll probably come out in a year or two, but all the red wines are vinified the way you would vinify a traditional classic style Barolo.
Cool. All right. Well, aromatically right away, I mean, it's very strawberry for me, and it's like alpine strawberry. It's the way I would describe it. There's cinnamon, plenty of cinnamon, beautiful brown spice, flicker of balsamic there in the background for me, but right away hit by the strawberry, and not evolved strawberry, a very ripe strawberry. I just think exactly of those alpine strawberries I pick that have the seeds on the outside. It's exactly the kind of aroma signature right away. But you know, in looking at this wine, this is a 2013, and looking at it, the core for me is quite medium, almost to deep on this size pour I have here. But the wine is really on the rim, is really now started to show some development. Almost, you know, almost moving a little bit to tawny on the rim. And that's very interesting. It's very kind of primary in the middle, but moving to, you know, garnet and out to tawny on the rim. So I know that, you know, it's similar to Nebbiolo in that it doesn't have that much anthocyanin, you know, that it is going to show evolution in the color fairly quickly. And that's not really an indicator that it's going to show that evolution aromatically or on the palate. And so that's something to note, because initially you might look at it and think, oh, my expectation would be these types of aromas, but it's not the case. Just going back in for a second note, there's a lot of spice, as kind of more greener spice, but maybe dried green spice there as well too. Do you pick up on that?
I do. To me, the note that really emerges is that kind of Eastern cinnamon, and I do. The strawberry thing is very, you know, and I know exactly it's like the wild strawberries you see in when you go to Piedmont, especially in the spring.
They're alpine strawberries. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I got my first taste of the wine, and usually when I take my first taste, I'm just looking for impressions. I'm not really deconstructing it right away. Just that first taste is just get it on the palate, see how it feels, and then go back in and start to pick it apart, deconstruct it, you know. It's very
great to taste. It's great to taste this with you.
Oh, and you too, Jeremy. What a treat. What a treat. I'm missing my Jeremy time for sure. On the palate, the weight is medium minus. It's not, you know, it's really on the minus side of medium. It's a very, you know, light on its feet on your palate here. So it's not going to be a wine that is going to be tiring, or, you know, it's a perfect drinking wine. I know in Italy we would never drink anything without having some food present, but it's
that's my weight. What would you compare this with tonight when you guys sit down to dinner?
You know, I'm going to have to think twice about that, because I know it's on the menu already, and I'm pretty sure, you know, most wines work with most foods, but this wine is going to be an easy pairing because of its weight, its beautiful bright acidity. Acidity here is definitely bright, driving the train, but very balanced against the fruit flavors. Everything's in perfect balance here, I would say. For balance and intensity, we're right on the money here. But let's talk a little bit about the flavors on the palate. I mean, what does the wine actually deliver? Is it mirroring what we saw in the aromas, or is it even more complex? You know, is it the same thing there plus a little bit more, like bonus flavors, right? I don't know, for me, definitely more apparent fruit. And now I'm picking up on some mineral expressions like graphite. There's a flicker of smokiness there. Could that be inherent to the grape?
To me, this is a classic style of Freisa, where you don't get the earthiness. You're not going to get the tar, the kind of truffle.
Tar and roses truffle thing, yeah.
Here you get the fruit, really, I mean, to my glass, really bright fruit, but then really intense minerality. it's one of the interesting things about these virtual tastings. At the end of the day, we have the same wine from the same vintage, et cetera, but the wine, there's always going to be some bottle variation.
Oh, sure. And there can be factors related to where we're tasting. My climate's a little different than your climate, but I think this wine is so balanced and beautifully integrated that, and it's at a, for me, it's at a very perfect point in its drinking window. I don't really see this wine as being something you would put in the cellar for 20 years, but I see it as something you could certainly enjoy now. We're 7 years in. I would, give it 5 to 7 in the cellar for this wine. To make sure that we're not losing any of that beautiful fruit, which is really the compelling, the most compelling aspect of the wine is the fruit and the mineral expression for me, for sure.
Well, one of the things you touched upon something so important about, where this wine is in its evolution, and it's in a great drinking window. One of the really great things about Scarpa is that they've always held back vintages. They have a library. I mean, you can walk into the Scarpa tasting room, which is open, by the way, in Nizza, where I know you've been, and you can taste wines going back to the 80s and 70s if you want to, and they have quite a bit of wine on hand. They are constantly tasting wine. It's one of the great places to taste because you'll be tasting with the winemakers and they'll say, oh, you know what? This reminds me of 2007. Let's go grab a bottle and compare the two wines. It's just such a fabulous experience. This is a current release for them. And it's because probably about a year or so ago, the winemakers tasted this and said, hey, this is right now, we feel it's at it. When you buy a bottle of Scarpa, and of course these bottles were given to us for this tasting, you're getting a wine that's at least the winemaker feels is in its drinking window. Right. To me, Frei for me is for spicy food. It's my red wine that I like, if I'm doing some Asian food with spice, even if I'm doing, I would love to do like a carne asada tampiqueña with this, with some, guacamole, with that kind of acidity that's from the guacamole and the heat from the marinade for the, this is one of my go-tos. Anyway, Deborah, it's really half of the fun of doing this was just getting to see you and catch up. Thank you so much for the update about Slow Wine. I'm so glad it's in your hands. It couldn't be in better hands. And I thank
you for putting it in my hands. I can only thank you for that. I owe you one, Jeremy.
Right, John. At the end of the day, Giancarlo needed someone like me to build the network, and it was the perfect. I mean, I'm so proud of the work we did together, and I'm just so,
as am I.
Like I said, well at night knowing that those 3 years I put into it are in the best hands they could be. So I'm looking. I hope I'm before year's end, and you guys be safe.